So, hello everybody from all over the world. I would like to introduce myself to you first. I'm Khaled from Luxor. I'm working as a tour guide, guiding people to everywhere in Egypt. So, hello to you from all over the world and Happy New Year. Our virtual tour today is going to be around the two temples of Abydos and Dendera. And I would like to tell you about our virtual tour. I will guide you around the temples first, and at the end of the tour, you can unmute yourselves to feel freely to ask any question about anything. So please, while we have the tour for 1 hour roughly, you mute yourselves and don't write in the chat room. Till the end of the tour, you will have your time to ask and to speak about anything you like to know. First here, I would like to describe this site for you. This is here, the temples of Abydos. Abydos is a city near or north from Luxor city. It's 200 kilometers north from the city of Luxor. The city here is a little city compared to the population of Egypt. And it's a non-touristic city. The only site of this city is just the Temple of Abydos. Such tours to the two temples of Abydos and Dendera, we do them in 1-day tour from Luxor city, because usually the tourist would stay in Luxor city and they come in 1-day tour to visit those two sites. Here, I would like to tell you first about the Temple of Abydos. This city in ancient Egypt was one of the most important cities because the founder of Egypt arose from this city. The first king to unify Egypt in ancient time, called Menes or Narmer, he was the last king to do the unity of Egypt. And the pharaoh or the first king to try the unity of Egypt, he came also from nearby this city. He was called the Scorpion King. The Scorpion King, because the first depiction dating to his time was just a depiction of a scorpion. That's why we named this king the Scorpion King. This king, he was the first one to try to do the unity of Egypt. And he began to unify the nearby cities from here. And at that time, Egypt was consisting of two big kingdoms, a kingdom in south of Egypt, and this city was the center of this city or of this kingdom, and another kingdom in north of Egypt. And the founder of Egypt arose from here. He didn't reach the final unity to Egypt. And the second pharaoh who did the final unity was called Menes or Narmer. This was just like an adjective to him. It means the founder of Egypt, because at that time they were not writing yet. To invent the writings at that time, roughly 3,200 BC, before 5,000 years ago, it took them a long time to reach the final writings at that time. So we could have named him the founder of Egypt. This city was very holy to the ancient Egyptians because this was the residence of God Osiris, the main god of the afterlife. The ancient Egyptians, during their first life, they used to do a pilgrim to this city because it has the grave of God Osiris, the patron god of the afterlife. I will show you it for you during our tour today. And here, some of the Egyptian pharaohs built some of the monuments. The recent temple here was built mainly by two pharaohs, King Seti I and his son Ramesses II. Seti I was one of the greatest pharaohs in the ancient Egyptian civilization. He was ruling Egypt during the New Kingdom, dynasty number 19. He was the son of the pharaoh Ramesses I. His father was a general of the army at the end of dynasty number 18, and his pharaoh died, and there was no crown prince. So the general of the army, Ramesses I, founded the new dynasty, was famous for the Ramessid name. And this pharaoh, his son was called Seti I. Seti I ruled Egypt 11 years, 1290 BC till 1279 BC. Seti I The art style during his time was the best in the ancient Egyptian civilization. He decided to build a unique temple next to the grave of god Osiris, next to the residence, to the afterlife. And this temple was built originally of limestone. Ramesses II, his son, succeeded him and completed the temple. When he completed the temple, Ramesses II was not caring about the fine art like his father. So he built and completed the temple of sandstone. And he built a little temple for himself next to his father's temple. This is first, you can see here is the courtyard. The courtyard and the open court, you can see it's totally destroyed. There was a big pylon, big towers here in the front, but they were totally destroyed since ancient time. And you can see the people are still living nearby the temple. They are living on some of the ruins belonging to the temple, by the way. So we would go closer right here to show you the facade and the entranceway to the temple. So look here to the court of the temple, you can see the columns supporting the ceiling. Those columns here are built of sandstone, while the column or the walls are of limestone. Those sandstones were added by King Ramesses I, or Ramesses II, sorry, the son of King Seti I. He added such part of the temple and the unique ceiling here. It has a very interesting depiction. To this side, it has a depiction showing some of the change of the writings. They are showing here on the ceiling. To this side, they are showing some of the interesting scenes. The famous scene of Abydos, the mystery of having a depiction of a helicopter and submarine, because there is a change of the writings happened during the time of King Ramesses II. So they show us on the walls interesting scenes. There were some writings written by King Seti I, and his son Ramesses II completed the writings later. So when we see the writings, they give us the feeling as if they were made as a scene of helicopter like Apache and a submarine. And this is one of the mysteries of this temple. But they are showing us the way or the depiction in this way. As for the writings, they are just writings and they were changed later. Here, one of the most interesting things of this temple here, you can see the king's vestibule. This is a king's list, one of the main records recording the history of the ancient Egyptians. King Seti I, this one, right, standing here, and his crown prince, his elder son, Ramesses II, is catching a papyrus roll, and he was telling us about his pharaohs or his ancestors who ruled along the Egyptian civilization. This is one of the rare records about the ancient Egyptians for writing their history by themselves. They wrote here on the walls 76 names of the greatest pharaohs, from the founder of Egypt, King Minas or Narmer, and ending by King Seti I. You can see the name on the bottom. Two names here are repeated. The names here which are repeated, those are the names of King Seti I. Look here to the famous name. First name here is Mina or Narmer. That was the founder of Egypt. And some of the pharaohs, they missed their names in purpose. They didn't write their names when they were against the faith of the ancient Egyptians, like the Queen Hatshepsut. Queen Hatshepsut, because she was not recorded with the pharaohs of Egypt, despite she was a ruler and she was ruling Egypt for 22 years. But the ancient Egyptian pharaohs were not recording her, and this is one of the most interesting things about them. And they missed here in purpose also the writings of the names of the famous pharaohs. like the family of Akhenaten and Tutankhamun and the high priest Ai and Semnech-Kara. This family of Akhenaten were missed in purpose because they were considered by the ancient Egyptians hieratic pharaohs, and they were believing originally in one god. So they didn't want to mention them in the records of the history because they didn't want to show the Egyptians about the change of religion. This is here one of the main and rare records recording the history of the ancient Egyptians by themselves. This is called the King's List in the Temple of Abydos. This was written here by King Seti I. And usually the Egyptian pharaohs were recording their history on the walls of the temples and on the documents of papyrus plans. And here are some of the rare writings mentioned by the ancient Egyptians themselves. We would go to another part. In this temple, there is something very important, that there are 7 sanctuaries. The 7 sanctuaries for the 7 Holy of Holies for the 7 elements of the human beings. The ancient Egyptians believed that this city was the origin of God Osiris, the god of the afterlife. So they thought that in the afterlife, the soul will have a journey in the afterlife beginning from this city to enter to the afterlife through the grave of God Osiris. God Osiris, he was the first one to be mummified, to take the form of the mummy. And the ancient Egyptians used to have a pilgrim during their first life to visit this city, because this city was one of the most sacred cities for them. And King Seti I built 7 sanctuaries in this temple to the 7 elements of the human beings, because the ancient Egyptians were believing that any person would be consisting of 7 elements. Those 7 elements forming the human being. The 7 elements were called by the ancient Egyptians Ka, Ba, Akh, Shu, Ren, Ib, Khe. You have to know the meaning of such words. The 7 elements were the soul or the spirit. The double is like the deja vu, conscience, name, heart, body, and shadow. They were believing that such elements would get the access from the afterlife to enter this temple in particular. That's why they were having false doors here. This false door was just for the spirit or the soul to come from behind, because behind this wall, this solid wall, behind it is the grave of God Osiris, which is called Osirion. They believed that the soul would get the access through this false door to enjoy the offerings presented here. Because the ancient Egyptians, when they were visiting this temple, they were getting the food and the water and the wine and the beef meat, and to present them here to the priests, because they were believing that the soul would come from the afterlife and making full use of the dedications or the offerings presented here. This is here a sanctuary for God Amon-Ra. Amon-Ra is this god shown as a man with a crown of 2 long feathers, wearing his twisted beard and royal kilt. Here is the Pharaoh Seti I is blessing and putting the crowns into the god and some of the different necklaces. One of the images of this god here, God Amon-Ra, is to have a figure called God Amon-Min, god of fertility, to show him like this way, with one hand up and one leg up, shown with a genital in this way. And here is the king is doing rituals and praying in front of this god. To the walls here, you will see the king is burning incense and putting offerings into God Amon-Ra. And here is the god is blessing the pharaoh and giving him the symbol of ruling Egypt. It's called was. Was is a stick which is always caught by the Egyptian gods, like here. This is a stick which is caught by the god. You can see the colors are still preserved in the shade, not affected by direct sun nor rains. Look here to the ceiling. The ceiling is vaulted ceiling to lighten the stress on top. You can see it's still having relics of a smoke, because people were living here for a long time. especially during medieval age. And since the 3rd century AD till just 100 years ago, the temples of Egypt were not used. There were a few visitors coming every year. And at that time, people were preferring to live in places or to live in places for free, like here, like living in the temples. So they were living their normal life, cooking and burning wood in winter time to make it warm for themselves. So you can see here is the facade of the temple, very close shot, showing the facade of the temple and the pillars, showing the relation of the king in front of the different gods, especially here, God Amun-Ra. So he was blessing the king and showing the king in front of different deities. So such columns here are built of limestone. So they were built by King Seti the First. So we'd enter into another part of the temple. Okay, so the shrine here, this is shrine for God Amun-Ra, and we will enter into another shrine. Yeah, here is a shrine for God Ra himself. Ra was always depicted as a ram image with a sun disk or a falcon with a sun disk. And here is the king is doing a prayers in front of this god and presenting ointments of lotus oil. This is for refreshing the soul of the god. While the god here is rewarding him by giving him the symbol of ruling Egypt. It's called Was. And here is doing different rituals to the statues of the god. And you will see again the false door where they used to give the chance to the soul to go easily through it. And here you can see God Ra is as a human figure giving the king the different symbols of ruling Egypt and power and eternity to show that he was a royal pharaoh and he should rule on behalf of the gods. Here you can see the Osirian. The Osirian was the grave of God Osiris. This is the entry to the afterlife. And this was built since ancient time, before the rise of the Egyptian civilization. Okay? Before the rise of the Egyptian civilization, they began to make the grave of God Osiris because this was the main philosophy to the ancient Egyptians. Look right here. You can see the pillars were made of a granite stone. There were no writings at that time. They were just building without recording their philosophy. You can see it's filled with green water. And this is a groundwater. This is a problem that they couldn't have reached the end of this tunnels or the tunnels here. That's why they are building nowadays a new project, grounding the water, to do excavations here to reach the end of this grave, because the ancient Egyptians were believing it was connected to the afterlife, and they wanted to find an end to the tunnel here, because the tunnel here is endless, and they couldn't have reached the last part of this tunnel. Some of the writings here were added during the time of King Seti I, during the New Kingdom, so 3,300 years ago. This grave of God Osiris, which is called the Osirian, is nowadays closed for the visitors. By the way, it's open just for a special visit, because people who are doing meditation, this place was the most interesting for them, because this place has a strange energy. When the people get inside here, they would feel with a strange power. And a lot of people would come in particular for doing a pilgrim nowadays, especially those who need to charge some of the energy from the ancient Egyptian temples. And that's why this place is open just for a special visit. And far from here to the desert, just 1 mile to the west side near the mountain, the oldest tombs of Egypt, of the Old Kingdom and the Archaic period, like the tombs of the first dynasty and the second dynasty of the ancient Egyptian civilization, they were making 2 tombs at that time. A tomb here to the west side of this grave, and another tomb at Saqqara in Giza, near Memphis. At that time, they needed to have their own tombs here next to the grave of god Osiris. Later on, along the Egyptian civilization, they were making their tombs in anywhere in Egypt, and they thought that the soul in the afterlife would do the journey to this city. So they don't need to get the soul or the tomb itself next to this grave. So they thought that there will be a journey to the soul itself to do the journey to this place. We would enter again to see some of the little details here on the columns. Yeah, when you see here the ceiling, you can see the ceiling, a part is restored because it was broken. And you can see on the ceiling the winged vultures, symbols of protection, that was all having colors. But unfortunately, most of the colors were defaced because of the smoke and the people who were living here inside the temple for a long time. You can see here the writings and the dedications made by King Seti I. He was writing, you can see that the writings here, most of them were repeated on the top, because what is written here, that this monument was built by King Min Mitra. Min Mitra, it means the stable justice of God Ra. This was the name of King Seti I. And here it's written Radi NF. It means he made or built. M Minu F. He built some of his monuments. In it F, to his father. So he wrote here that King Seti I built some of his monuments to his father. Here is Peta. This is God Peta. So he built several shrines, and this is a shrine for God Peta. Okay, here is Nefer Her. If every beautiful thing he built for his father God Peta, some of his monuments of the beautiful things. Here is Min Mitra, King Seti I, Redit NF, he made Hot Nesser. It means a temple to the god. So he built some of his good monuments to his father, God Peta here. God Peta, he was god of arts and darkness. It means that this is a shrine here, was a sanctuary for God Peta, who was god of arts and darkness. So this is the kind of writings here on the walls. Here you can see the king presenting himself, doing like nowadays protocol in front of God Peta. This is God Peta, shown as a man, bald with no hair and having a straight beard, similar to the statue of the Oscar, or the statue of the Oscar is similar to him. Here you can see the king is catching a tool. This is here for burning incense, because incense was considered the food of the gods. So he's presenting offerings of incense to his father God Peta to gain his blessings. On the lower level, you can see the offerings bearers like a servant. They were carrying several jars of lotus oil. This is here, the lotus oil was very important for refreshing the soul of the gods. They used to present the lotus oil to the gods to refresh the soul of the gods. And we would go to another part. Yeah. So here again, you can see the shrine of God Ra. So from here, you can see the Osirian. This is here from the top. This is the green water of the groundwater. And there is something very interesting here in this part, that there is a lot of catfish. Catfish in ancient Egypt, by the way, it was not allowed to be eaten. It was forbidden by the ancient Egyptians, because the ancient Egyptians believed that the catfish was supporting the symbol of evil, God Set, the bad brother of God Osiris, the one who killed him. And that's why God Osiris preferred to be the god of the afterlife. So this place was filled of such kind of fish. You can see it here from the top. This is the Osirian when it was opened for the visitors. Here you can see some of the people were still entering here. Okay, here behind the temple, you can see the 7 sanctuaries were just here inside. So we'll go back again. Next, we are going to see the famous temple of Dendera. So we would move to see the other temple of goddess Hathor. Okay. So this temple is 70 kilometers north from Luxor city. And here, please, you can look to the chat room. So all the questions will be at the end of our virtual tour. I would look for the chat room. Okay. So here you can look to the links if you would like to have any more information. And then we are going here to see the temple of Dendera for goddess Hathor. This temple and this city here is in north side of Luxor city, 70 kilometers north from Luxor city. There is a nice temple here called the Temple of Dendera for goddess Hathor. This temple is reached first from Luxor city, and this temple was built in ruins of an old Egyptian temple. There was an old Egyptian temple built since the time of King Cheops or Khufu, the builder of the greatest pyramid. So such a place was very holy to the ancient Egyptians, and they were building here since ancient time. Later on, during the Greeks and Roman time, they added a new temple here. So this temple is a modern temple, considered new. That's why it's more preserved. The temple here was built in during the Greek and Roman times, since 116 BC till 34 AD. So just 2,100 years compared to the other temples of Egypt, is very preserved. That's why this temple is still keeping. The ceiling is intact, and you can walk on top of the temple on the 2nd floor. The name of this city, Dendera, this name came to us by the Arabs. In ancient Egypt, they were calling this site Ta Nisret. Ta Nisret, it means the land of the goddess. Because they built a temple here, a famous temple for goddess Hathor. Hathor was the wife of god Horus. Hathor or Hathor, she was goddess of joy, love, music, and beauty. Her animal figure was a cow. Her human figure was a female face with 2 cow ears. Of course, during the ancient time, it was called Ta Nisret, and then it was called Tantiras by the Greeks, and it was called Dendera by the Arabs, or Dendera. This temple here, you can see the outer part. You can feel clearly that those columns are Roman style. Those columns taking a design called Corinthian style, Roman style. And here to the other side, you can see them very clear. So this is here Roman addition. So the Roman additions in this temple are very little, but most of the temple, 90%, was built during the Greek period. This gate here was built by the famous Roman emperor Nero. And just this little gate. In the outer walls of the temple here, you can see the outer walls of mud bricks surrounding the whole temple. Here, we can go closer to show you the inner part of the temple. Sorry. First construction here, after passing the wall, you will see the facade of the temple like this way. So this is the main temple right here. And to the right-hand side, some of the little constructions were added. This one here was added during the Roman time. This is called the Mamizi. Mamizi is a Roman word for the birth room of the gods. because during the Roman times, they began to make the stories of the gods and the mythology as players. So they wanted to show the people of Egypt that the gods were the same like human beings, giving birth and eating and came to life as a human being and feeding the gods and growing him up, because the god of Egypt was the same like the king. So they were making a little room like that in front of each temple. It's called Mamizi, or the birth room. At that time, they wanted to show the Egyptian people that the gods or the kings were the same like the gods. Here, a little part was used as a church, and this is one of the oldest churches in Egypt, built at the 3rd century AD. Most of the Egyptian temples were used in this function. And when you come to see this place, you will see some of the crosses and the transformation of the key of life into a cross, and still being preserved here. And when we enter here into the Mamizi, or the birth room of the god, you would see the images here on the walls are defaced, because the people who are living here, you can feel that clearly from the ceiling. The ceiling here is still keeping the little colors, but you can see the restoration print. This is very important. This is a restoration print to show you how was the color before doing restoration to the ceiling. It was filled with smoke, and for a long time they were doing restoration. Restoration nowadays is just to absorb the smoke or the dust or the trash of birds. Here you can see just the smoke, how it was before doing cleaning to the ceiling. You can see it showing a little colors and showing the winged vulture with the winged sun disk, symbol of protections. So when people were living here, they were making defacement to the images of the gods and the figures on the walls. Here you can see God Horus, how he was grown up as a child, and here treating him like a human being and being fed with his mother, goddess Hathor. This is God Horus the Younger, because we have the triad of this city were three. God Horus the Elder and his wife goddess Hathor and their son God Horus the Younger. We call him Horus the Younger, but he was called Hirsimatawi. This is his name in hieroglyphic. Here you can see God Horus is carrying his little child, and here is goddess Isis was feeding the little god Horus here from her milk. And here you can see identifying the king to the several gods of Egypt, okay, to show that he was a successor of the gods. On the lower level, you can see the servants. They were playing the music and celebrating the birth of the god. Here you can see the god as a child being carried, and here is the god himself, and this is his double. His double, one of the main elements, which is following the person everywhere, and the double is called Ka in ancient. It's like the deja vu. It's a part of the human being. And here you can see the servants of goddess Hathor were playing music, celebrating the god when he came to life. Right here, feeding the god more. And you can see in the depiction still some of the colors are still preserved, but I will show you the best colors inside this temple. Here you can see the false door as usual. This is where they used to get the chance or the energy to the soul to go easily through it. We will see now the outer walls. You can see how it is looking like from outside. Here is the god as a human figure standing and being fed directly from his mother. And here is shown as a child putting his finger in his mouth and showing him naked. That was normal and common in ancient Egypt, the same like here. And to the right hand side, you can see him here again. So that was common. Next to the temple here, there was some important things. There was a sanatorium or a hospital, because the meaning of a temple at that time was more than being a place for prayers. It was the center of the city. So if anyone has any problem in health or anything, he used to go to the temple. and they used to send their children for the education in the temple. And everything, even the prison and the judge and the judgment itself in the temple. So the meaning of a temple is more than a place for prayers at that time. Okay. So we'll move into another part. You can see here the greatest columns of the temple. And this is the forecourt. After entering into the temple, you would see 18 columns. Those 18 columns were open for the common people. Average people were entering into the temple right here because they were not allowed to go inside the inner parts of the temple. So they were just coming right here. This part is famous for the ceiling. The ceiling here is adorned with goddess Nut, the goddess of skies. Here is the depiction of the 6 northern star signs. Look to the goddess Nut. To the ceiling here, you can see the goddess stretching her hands. And here she was swallowing the sun in the evening. And then the sun was running in her body. And then she was giving birth to the scarab in the morning, like giving birth to the sun disk in the morning, taking the form of the scarab. And here you can see some of the star signs on the ceiling, but just 6 star signs. You can see the lion here. You can see the scale and the areas. And here you can see the restoration print when they leave a little part with the smoke right here. This is to show the restoration, how it was looking like before doing restoration. We'll go to another part here of those columns. You can see the colors in the ceiling still preserved in the shade, not affected by direct sun or rains. So you can see them here in the middle. How were the colors looking like? So look to the ceiling and to the smoke, which was affecting on the ceiling. When the people were living here, a place for free. It was like a castle to live here for free. Look here before restoration, and here is after restoration. So that did just absorb the smoke and the dust from the ceiling. And you can see on the capitals of columns the images of goddess Hathor as a human figure with female face and 2 cow ears. Goddess Hathor at that time, of course, was very important and effective. She was goddess of joy, love, music, and beauty. We would see to the other side. I would like to show you the other 6 star signs here. From here, you can see the 6,000 star signs. Look here to the top. You can see goddess Hathor, or goddess Nut, sorry, stretching her hands, and she was swallowing the sun and giving birth to the sun in the morning. Look here, you can see here very clear from this angle. Look right here. And here you can see some of the other star signs along the whole ceiling. So this temple was one of the rare temples where they recorded for us the calendars and the philosophy of the ancient Egyptians. But the original calendar is not existing nowadays anymore in the temple, because the original calendar was taken to the Louvre Museum in France. And they left for us a replica of this calendar. This temple is famous for the zodiac, the famous zodiac. And the ancient Egyptians were having a very important calendar at that time. They were having 360 days, the basic days for the year. It is recorded on the ceiling of this temple. Plus 5 to 6 days they were extras because they were celebrating the beginning of the new year. At that time, they set their calendar by the beginning of the appearance of a very vivid star called the Sirius. Here you can see something very interesting on the walls of this temple. The cartouches here. The cartouches are the frames where they used to write the royal names on the walls of the temples. And the cartouches here are empty because at that time, the capital of Egypt was in Alexandria, very far from here. So every 2 or 3 years, there was a new king ruling Egypt. And at that time, the workers who were doing their job here, they didn't know who became a new pharaoh, who became a new king during the Greek period. There was a time of unrest in Alexandria, in the capital, far from here. So when they were making their jobs, look right here, like making a pharaoh burning incense in front of the goddess of the temple, making a pharaoh presenting the offerings of ointments in front of the goddess of the temple, putting the servants here, the servants of the pharaoh presenting the offerings and carrying the offerings. So at that time, the workers who were doing their job, they didn't know who became a new pharaoh. So they were leaving the cartouche empty. And once they began to get a big dedication, it means a big offerings from the kings of Egypt to appreciate their work, they used to name the king. And this is a kind of hypocrisy in the art. So they were making the faces aside. When it is a profile or a side like that, it doesn't differ from a person to another. The only difference can be just the names, and they were leaving the names empty. Another theory or another explanation for naming or for leaving the names empty right here is to put the cartouches for every king coming to visit this temple, because there were several kings participating in building it. It was not built by one king like the rest of the Egyptian temples. So several kings were participating in building them. So they were usually leaving the cartouches empty. And once they were visited by any king, they were just naming him and putting his letters in silver cartouches or golden letters. Here you can see the influence of the Greeks and Roman art, showing the complete female details of the goddess and showing them rough out carvings, not like the ancient Egyptian art. The ancient Egyptian art was always fine and was not showing the complete details like here. We would move into another part of the temple. Well, in ancient Egypt, people or average people were allowed just to enter into this hall and not to go inside. So you can see we are very close here to the ceiling. And this is very high, by the way. Look right here when we enter inside. So I'll show it from another part. So I would show the surroundings of this temple, and one of the main attractions here is the famous image of Queen Cleopatra VII. The only temple in Egypt still have the painting and the carvings dating to the time of Cleopatra VII, because Cleopatra, at that time, after she died, her rival, Octavius Augustus ordered to eliminate hair from the records of the monuments of Egypt. So this is the only depiction in all over Egypt here showing the famous queen, Cleopatra. And here is her son, Caesarion. And here's the only depiction for her in all over Egypt. When you look behind here, you can see water spouts taking the images of lions. And the function of those water spouts is to get the water from the roof of the temple out from the walls, because the walls here are leaning, not 90 degree, not 3 angle, because they were making such design as a cornice here to support the walls. And one of the most interesting things of this temple that is still keeping the crypts underground, still being open for the visitors. And you can enter one of the crypts. In one of those crypts, there is a very important depiction of a lamp. Something very interesting, like a lamp for having electricity. Maybe it is similar to a lamp, but it's not a lamp itself. It would be as a source of having light inside the temple in the deep places. And it's very interesting because it's making a sound even inside. When entering, even after shutting the electricity off, you would hear an interesting sound. This would be one of the sounds of the energy, because people were entering inside to charge some of the energy. And this temple is one of the rare temples in Egypt would give a positive energy to anyone. And you would feel that clearly when entering into the crypt. We know the main function of the crypt underground at that time was to store the documents and the best gifts given to the priests of the temples. They were hiding them in little crypts to hide them from the robbers. And right here, you can see the sacred lake. This lake is totally dry, of course, nowadays, because of the difference in levels. And from here to the water level in the Nile River. The Nile River not very far from here. It's just 1 mile far from those walls. This lake is very dry. That's why you can see the palm trees are growing inside this sacred lake. This sacred lake is connected by a tunnel to the Nile River because they needed to have a source of light or a source of water, and in the same time, they needed to have a place to run away far from the temple. So this is one of the most interesting things. In cases they were attacked by robbers on any invasions in ancient Egypt, they were believing that they needed a place to run out from the temple. And here is a little entrance for a Nilometer. Nilometer, a place where they used to know the height of water of the Nile River. In ancient Egypt, by the way, even till the year 1970, this land here next to the temple was reached by the water of the Nile. And it was very close, and there was a canal connecting the Nile River to here. And they needed to have a place to know the height of water of the Nile, and at the same time to run away far from the temple. Here is one of the most interesting buildings. This is a little temple here for goddess Isis. Goddess Isis was goddess of love to the ancient Egyptians. She was the wife of god Osiris. This temple here is one of the most interesting temples. Despite it's very little, but you can feel something very strange in this temple. It's giving a strange energy. And this is one of the main holy places in Egypt, by the way. A lot of people would believe in that. And once they come to visit this place and they would touch the walls here, they would feel it. Look to the bottom. You can see here such cavities here in between each 2 blocks of stones. They used to cut a shape like dovetail, and they used to put a piece of wood to match this form. And they used to put a piece of wood to connect them. This is the only way of connecting the stones together here. And they didn't use any concrete or cement. They were using such way for jointing the stones together. Wood would be rotten or decayed, so they used to put resin or glue on top. And this is here very interesting. So we'll move into another part. Here is the sanctuary of the temple. This sanctuary, or the Holy of Holies, it was totally with defacement on the ceiling. Look here, you can see the colors here. They were of smoke because the people who were living here burning, and they couldn't have done more restoration. They stopped the restoration right here. And you can see here is a very important festival on the wall. On the wall here, the festival of this city is called the Festival of the Beautiful Meeting. God Horus, the husband of goddess Hathor, he used to come every year to visit his wife in her temple. God Horus was worshipped in the city of Edfu. Edfu is 200 kilometers south from here. God Horus used to come in a big procession to visit his wife in her temple. It means that the statue of the god used to be brought by the priestess of Edfu. And they used to put the statue of the god together with his wife in the sanctuary of this temple right here in this place. And the people at that time were celebrating, waiting outside and visiting the temple at that time of the year, because every city used to have its own festival and celebration related to the god of the temple. Here you can see the king is burning incense to feed the procession of the goddess. So here is a little boat where this boat here was the image of goddess Hathor. So this boat should have the statue of goddess Hathor. And here is the boat for god Horus with the falcon head. And here you can see the cartouches always empty for the same reason I told you about, that the several kings participated in building this place, and in the same time, just to show, or they didn't want to show who was the pharaoh who built it, because it was not built by one pharaoh. So now you can unmute yourselves and to feel freely to ask you any question, or to ask any question about our virtual tour today. Well, did you enjoy the tour? Hello, everybody. So I'll give you the ability to unmute yourselves. Yes.
Yeah, the tour was great. Thank you.
Very interesting as usual.
Thank you so much.
Happy New Year first. I have
Happy
a
New
question.
Year. Yes.
When the kings came in and put on the temple, what was important to them, how did they choose? Was it in reference to their own area, or?
Okay, you mean to choose a site of the temple or to build a temple?
No, I mean like when they visited the temple, did they choose to make a carving of a god that was important to them?
Yeah, of course, especially the main gods of the temples. So they were putting in their imaginations that they should be depictions for the several gods, and they were doing several rituals. For example, they were doing rituals like founding the temple and dedicating the temples to the gods, and to present the temple to the gods, and to present the offerings to the gods, and to present the dedications and the flowers. So they were doing usual rituals on the walls of the temples, and they were the same in every temple. The only difference can be just the victory of the kings. For example, if they did any victory against the enemies, so they were recording their history also on the walls of the temple. If the temple is a global temple like this one, it means made by several kings. So they were not having the chance to act or to do everything they needed. So they were doing just religious scenes on the walls of the temples like here. I hope it's answering your question.
Yes, it
I
does.
have a question.
Yes. So one by one, please. So everyone raising hands. If anyone
Okay.
asking a question, raising a hand.
I don't have a choice about raising a hand.
So, okay. So who's next?
Got 84 people. Mine show up?
Yes.
It's okay. I can. What is the color? The bluish color that's on the ceiling, and what was the substance that gave it that color and for it to last so long? I'm presuming it's original.
Okay, this is original color, of course. The colors here were natural colors always. they were using for the red color, or you were asking about the blue color in particular. The blue color was lapis lazuli. They used to make it of a real color of lapis lazuli, and they were fixing the colors by egg white, so it's lasting forever. So this is a miracle of the ancient Egyptians. Imagine when you visit the tombs, you would see them as they are painted today because of the original colors they were using. Okay? I hope it's answering your question.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
You're welcome. You're welcome, Mr. William.
I have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
You were talking about the canals and the body of water that were built. Did the temples used to be closer to an actual source of water than they are now?
Yeah, of course, because they were coming closer and traveling next to the temples. So they were always harbors. Yeah, they were always harbors to the temples to transport the stones. So how to get the stones next to the temple? They needed to get them very close in this way. So there were canals, and the water during the flood season in ancient Egypt were coming closer to the temples.
Thank you. Very, very beautiful.
You're welcome, ma'am.
Thank you, Khaled. The music for Hathor, goddess of music, what type of instruments did they use?
Okay.
And do we still use some today? Music.
We are still having them. This is a very important question. Goddess Hathor or Hathor, one of her main functions to be as a goddess of music. And there is a sistrum is related to Goddess Hathor. We are still having this Mauriki Shile. We are still having this sistrum. When you visit Dendera Temple, you will see it's the most important and popular instrument here is the sistrum of Goddess Hathor. When you see the West Bank of Luxor in the stones sculpture, you will see that the main thing made by the people here are the sistrum of Goddess Hathor. So this instrument usually was related with women, by the way, in ancient Egypt, because there was a part of the priests in all of the Egyptian temples called the musician priests. And the leader of this portion of the priesthood of the temple were women. So they were the women responsible for the music in the temples. They were called the servants or assistants of Hathor. And their function was just to celebrate using the music. The same like nowadays, like the official bands of any government, playing the music in the official ceremonies. Okay, I hope it's answering your question, Mauriki.
Thank you. And thank you. And what flowers did they use? She is the goddess of beauty. What flowers might they have used back then?
Oh,
for
the
decoration and ceremony.
Lotus flower. Lotus flower was the essence of flower. The lotus flower was giving the energy to the soul. And the ancient Egyptians were believing that the soul of the god is from lotus oil or lotus essence. Lotus was a symbol of south of Egypt. This flower is still grown in south of Egypt. And this is very important for you. When you come in the future, you should see the lotus essence. By the way, before watching this flower, you will smell it. And even for long distance, because here it's still pure. Hope's answering your question, Mauriki Sharon.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Thank you. I've been on all your tours, most of them, and I just love them. And my question is kind of weird. Okay, it bugs me. The spelling of Egypt, I want to always add a D, E-D-G. And because we spell like edge, the J sound is D-G, but you don't put that letter in Egypt. Do you know? You may not know.
I don't get what you asked. What do you mean?
Sound, Egypt.
Egypt, yeah.
We say that sound Egypt with a D and a G, like the word edge. You know, the edge of the
edge
corner.
And so you pronounce it Egypt
with no D.
With no D.
With no D.
Okay. We pronounce it here. We don't pronounce it Egypt at all. This name also is not Egyptian. This name is not by our language. You pronounce it Egypt This name came to you by the
Over
Greeks.
that before.
Okay. Okay, Samuel, Yerushalmi. So I will be waiting for your question. I will be waiting, sir, but just a minute. Okay.
I can. Okay, you hear me?
Yes, yes, of course.
Okay.
Okay, Josie Oz. Just a minute.
Okay,
Just a minute, please. Okay. So this name Egypt came to you by the Greeks. We don't call our country Egypt. We call it, in ancient time, it was called Kemet. And nowadays in our language in Arabic, we call it Misr. So this name Egypt came to you by the Greeks. Wow. The first one, or the first people to name our country Egypt, were the Greeks. When the Greeks came to Egypt, they noticed that the Egyptians were doing a pilgrim to a famous temple in the city of Memphis. This city, or this temple, was called Ekoptus. Ekoptus. This is a pronunciation. Ekoptus, this was the name of a temple. The Egyptians were doing a pilgrim to it. It's the same like nowadays calling the people of Saudi Arabia the people of Mecca or Kaaba. So they began to call the people of Egypt the people of Ekoptus. And then in modern languages, you begin to call it Egypt. So even this name, it's not ours. We use another name here in our country. We call it Misr. Inshallah, when you come to visit Egypt, it needs a long explanation. By the way, if I tell you just about the names of Egypt, I would give you 1 hour just explaining all of the names of Egypt. Really. Excellent. I hope it's answering your question, Jose Oz. Okay. Yes, Mr. Where is Mr. Shamuel Yerushalmi? Mr. Shamuel Yerushalmi. Now you can ask your question. Mr. Shmuel Yerushalmi. Okay.
Can I ask a question while we wait?
Yes.
Is there any chance that you've got a close-up of those, of the ceiling where the goddess consumes the sun in the evening and then gives birth to it in the morning? It's hard to see from your pictures, but that's a very interesting concept.
I will try. I will try while we are moving here. So I'll try. Here is the ceiling of the temple. This is the ceiling. Yes. So I will try to get closer, because you know that we cannot have everything in just a lecture like that. So you can always, when you can see them, of course, when you come to see them in real by yourself, but I will try to show you a part of the ceiling here.
Thank you.
Don't mention. So please, if you like our virtual tour and you like to support on our idea and your guide, so you can always look to the chat room, and here is the link if you want to support your guide by tipping. And thank you too much, and Happy New Year. So I will try to go to the ceiling to show you a part or a closer shot.
Can you also show us a picture of the submarine and the helicopter?
At Abydos Temple, this is very hard. You can hardly see it. So inshallah, I will prepare it for you in other virtual tours, but it's very hard for me to get it, because even when you come to see the temple by yourself, it will be harder for you to see it. Okay, so I cannot have it very clear for you. So submarine and the helicopter, but it's very famous. When you look to the internet and you look for the mystery of Abydos Temple, you would see the submarine and the helicopter. One of the main characteristic things. Look right here. This is a closer shot for goddess Nut, the goddess of skies. And here, this is a closer shot which we can get for the ceiling. Look here, you can see the goddess. Look right here. You can see here stretching the hands, and here is eating the dark sun. And then the sun should run in her body. And she's giving birth to the sun to the other side as a scarab. You can see here the rise of half a scarab. So she was giving birth to the scarab right here. And to the ceiling, you can see some of the star signs. The star signs here, you can see the Scorpion. And you can see the Aries here. And you can see the Lion to the other side here. So we cannot get the whole ceiling. This is the hardest view we can get. I hope it's helping you.
Yes, thank you.
Yes, Mr. Shamuel Yerushalmi. Yes, sir.
Yeah, I back now. Because I have any problems with electricity, and now I am back. Okay, I want to ask you next question. I want to ask you about social and economic regime in ancient Dendera and Abydos.
You mean about the ancient economy?
Yeah, economic and social regimes in Abydos and Dendera.
Okay. Nowadays or in ancient time? In ancient Egypt?
Yeah, in ancient time. Yeah, of course.
In ancient time, they were all working in agriculture and fishing in the Nile. And in a season of the year, all of the Egyptians were working, building in the temples. Imagine a country like Egypt, when it was filled with the water in 4 months of the year. So all of the Egyptians at that time were doing nothing. So all of the Egyptians during a season of the year, they were just working, building in the temples. So building in the temples at that time was like a national service to everyone and to build for themselves. And they were considering that as an offering to the Egyptian gods. So the best thing or the main thing for everyone at that time was to satisfy the kings and the gods. So they were building to the Egyptian temples. But the rest of the year, they were cutting the stones. They were working in agriculture. They were fishing. So this is the main jobs and economy of Egypt at that time. I hope it's answering your question, Mr. Shamuel. Okay?
Good afternoon, Khalid.
Yeah, thank you.
I have a question about the ceilings.
Yes.
Were they carved before they were put in place or after?
After. So when they were building here, they were covering all of this area with sand and debris and mud brick ramps. So all of this area was filled with the sand and debris and ramps. Look here. They were making, for example, the first step, and they were heighting the ramps from outside, and they were dragging the stones until reaching the top. By the way, they were finishing the carvings beginning from the ceiling, from here. And then they were going down with the carvings and painting. So when you always see any unfinished part of the Egyptian monuments, it should be on the bottom, not on top. So they were finishing the carvings and painting from the top because they couldn't have used the scaffolds for such high buildings. I hope it's answering your question, ma'am.
Yes, thank you.
Yes, you are welcome. Yes.
Khalid,
Yes,
on the columns,
yeah.
where it represented the goddess,
Yes.
and I'm sure I have her name wrong, but her face is defaced in almost every column.
No.
Is that intentional?
Intentional. This is goddess Hathor here. Why it's defaced? Imagine, my dear friends, look here to the colors. You can see vivid color on top and here darker color on the bottom, because the temple here was buried by the sand and debris and people were living here. So this was buried up to this level. Look here to this level, up to 6 to 8 meters.
Wow.
So people were living here on top. Imagine the people who were living here, and you can see all of the defacement on the figures here. Those people who were living here, they didn't believe in such things during medieval age. Since the 2nd century AD, the Egyptian people were converted to Christianity. So they were not believing in such images. So for them, they wanted to avoid them. They thought that they would have a magical power and they would not like to see them always. Imagine when a people or a person is sleeping here and waking up and finding the complete image of the goddess. So they would deface the images for this reason. Okay?
Thank you.
You're welcome, sir. So, any more questions? Mr. Robert Barnett. Robert Barnett? Okay. Brian?
Khalid?
Yes?
It's Isla here. I think I'm under Paul Stenning on the video.
You're welcome.
Hi.
Hi.
I just want to ask you, the Temple of Hathor, do they burn oils, or is there any incense burning now? The only reason why I ask is I was there 21 years ago and I could smell the sweetest of smells and no one else could around me on the tour. So I don't know whether I was just having a sort of out-of-body experience. I have no idea.
Okay. This temple is famous for the... Yeah. This temple is famous for the spiritual things. And this temple is having a lot of mystery. Dendera and Abydos, in the past, they were allowed to do the rituals inside. And this temple has some of the energy, like magnetical energy and like gravity inside the sanctuary or inside the crypts. And you can smell some of the incense without having any burning or anything here. This is normal.
Is it something that other people have had as well then?
Nowadays, it's not allowed, by the way, burning incense or doing a ritual inside the temple. But by bribing the guards, some people, we can do that. You can consider it's like tipping the guards, and you can do some of the rituals in the temple of goddess Isis. They would welcome doing that if there is no destruction to the monument and no high or loud sounds or disturbing the others. So in peace, anyone would do anything, okay? Yeah. And there is something interesting inside this temple. We have a depiction here in this temple of a priestess, a woman priestess is depicted on the walls. If anyone touched this priestess by his two hands, he would have an energy and he may fly up, to be honest with you. Yeah. It's happening.
Wow. I know I felt something extraordinary when I was there. It was the weirdest feeling. Yeah.
It's good that you have this experiment here in this temple. And I would like to tell you about such secrets. Okay. Really. But this is just, it's known by just few people. And I know this image in particular. If you touched it, you will just fly. You will just put your hands like this way on the walls, and you will find your body is going up above the hair of the priests. And this is a fact. And we don't know the explanation for that. By the way, a lot of people and spiritual people thinking that this priestess is still alive, or her soul is still on the depiction on the walls and still playing a very important role to the temple. So if you come in the future, I would show you this priestess woman and you would touch her by yourself.
Yes, no, that sounds fantastic. I know when you said about the lamp in one of the crypts, I was down there and I could feel something. The energy was amazing.
Not just the lamp. You know that there is a very interesting sound inside. Even we usually shut off the light inside this crypt. And when we shut off the light to be quiet and no one speaks, you hear a very interesting sound. This sound, when you close your eyes and you stay in the darkness for some time, you feel a strange energy coming out from the walls of the temple. This is one of the mystery. We think that the ancient Egyptians were using a kind of energy like electricity. How to generate such electricity or such energy? To be honest with you, they were putting a kinds of stones like granite in between the walls. So they used to make a kind of pressure, and that would generate like radio gas and power inside the walls. This would be one of the mysteries. That's why they made the crypts very steep and down the temple and down the sanctuary. So this is what is making it more interesting, but because it's down the sanctuary. So maybe they were keeping the statue of the goddess herself below the sanctuary. And that's why it's still having some of the energy there. I hope that you come again soon in the future, inshallah.
Oh, absolutely. Yes, without question.
Inshallah.
Thank you. Inshallah.
Inshallah. Yes. Any other question?
I have a question.
Yes.
Hi, this is Carol. You pointed out the water spouts that would drain water off the roof, but I'm wondering how much water was there? I mean, there wasn't much rain, right?
Not much rain, and it rarely rains here in south of Egypt. Every 3 to 4 years, it would rain 5 to 10 minutes. By the way, for our good luck, that last time it rained, it was yesterday. It was 3 minutes.
So why would they put water spouts in with some little rain?
Okay, they used to do the purification and the ritual to the statue of the goddess of the temple on the roof, so below the sun, so the water would go down through the water spouts. And in case if it rained a strong rain, because every 20 to 30 years they would be exceptional in the weather, and it would rain half an hour to 1 hour. Like, for example, you don't be astonished that when you hear in Egypt yesterday there was a snow in Egypt in the Red Sea by Hurghada, and that's exceptional. It is the first time in our history to see snow in the coast of the Red Sea in Hurghada. It became like Europe. Okay.
Wow, thank you so much.
So when they were building the temple, they were building it for thousands of years, and they were putting in their minds the different in change and in the weather and in the atmosphere and everything. That's why the temples of the ancient Egyptians were called temples of millions of years. So they were not built for a short time. Imagine such massive building built forever, to stay forever. And this temple here is a modern temple. That's why it's still preserved. It's just 2,100 years.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome, Carol. So any other question? Yes.
Yeah, this is Mr. David. You had mentioned something in terms of the Egyptians didn't eat catfish.
Yes.
Because of the god Seth.
Yes.
Can you elaborate on that?
Okay, it's recorded in the mythology related to God Osiris. You know the story of God Osiris.
Yes.
And that he was killed by his evil brother God Seth.
Right.
He was killed twice, 2 times.
Yeah.
The first time, and they regained his life again. And in the second time, he was killed and slaughtered into 14 parts.
Right.
And goddess Isis, the goddess of love, she was looking for her dead husband everywhere. And she didn't, she collected all of his parts, the 14. But she wanted to be pregnant, to have a child to inherit the throne of his father, God Osiris. She couldn't become pregnant because they lost the genital of God Osiris as it was eaten by the catfish in the Nile River. That's why the ancient Egyptians were preventing and not allowing eating the catfish. They considered it as a bad symbol, supported the symbol of evil. So the catfish was forbidden for this reason. And the catfish was discovered out from the grave of God Osiris the Osirian in Abydos, because the ancient Egyptians thinking that the catfish is regretting for supporting the symbol of evil. That's why several catfish are regretting their deeds and praying to God Osiris in the afterlife. Otherwise, they would not be accepted for entering into the paradise. So it's like regretting supporting the symbol of evil, and they didn't know that it was belonging to the good God Osiris. So this is why there is a lot of catfish in front of the grave of God Osiris. They are praying always to God Osiris to forgive them for supporting the symbol of evil. I hope I'm answering your question, Mr. David.
Yes, yes. Thank you.
You're welcome. Any other question? Okay, would you like me to ask you? So I wish that you enjoyed everything, and please, if you want to support your tour guide, you can look for the chat room, and you can look for all of the links we got here, and that's a link here for tipping and another link for World Virtual Tours, where you can look for our virtual tours. Our next virtual tour will be next Sunday at 8 January. We will Saturday 8 January at 9 p.m. we will have another tour, virtual tour to Aswan and Nubia. This is our next activity next week, inshallah, at Saturday. Here, okay, here is a question from in the chat room from Amy. Okay, here is another question in the chat room saying about are those the Greek star signs? No, not the Greek star signs. Those star signs are originally ancient Egyptians. So ancient Egyptians star signs, they were originally ancient Egyptians, and the ancient Egyptians were the first to invent the zodiac and the calendar and everything. Okay.
So the Greeks borrowed the Egyptian zodiac?
They got it from the Egyptians,
Wow.
the Greek. Okay.
Thank you.
You are welcome.
Thank you.
You are welcome. Here from a question from Harv in the chat room, so saying, do modern Egyptian people today ever compare and contrast similarities and differences between ancient beliefs of immortality of pharaohs and Egyptians faced today, such as Muslim and Coptic Christians and Baha'i and Judaism and Hindi and Buddhism? Well, I would like to tell you the concept. The ancient Egyptians, or the Egyptians nowadays, feeling the respect to the ancient Egyptian culture and philosophy and everything, but they don't do the rituals like the ancient Egyptians. So the ancient Egyptians were having different philosophy. We do something else nowadays, but we feel the respect and the honor that we were having the ancient Egyptian civilization as a part of our history. And it's a great part of our history because we were having the greatest civilization for a long time in the world. And Egypt was like the lamp and the leader to all of the old world. And here, I hope it's answering your question, Jav. And here is from, okay. Any other question in the chatting room? So I'm looking for the different questions. Can you show us the photograph of the submarine and the helicopter? We cannot get them right now, but later in the near future, I will get the depiction for you, inshallah. Okay. So any other questions before leaving? Okay. I hope you enjoyed everything for everybody. So have a good time and see you next Saturday, inshallah. Goodbye, everybody. Have a good time.